If you do a search right now with the two keywords Texas and Civil War, you will see numerous fascinating articles. In them, it is said that America could go to civil war because of Texas, and this is not a recent incident. Since 2021, various leading newspapers have been reporting that America is slowly heading towards civil war. Now don't get too excited, because in 2024, there is almost a 0% chance of a civil war in a stable country like America. But before 1846, this is a map of the USA. Texas is not a state in America, but it was almost half the size of America today. Just 2 years later, the map of America was almost the same as it is now. I said almost because there was no Alaska. I will make a video about Alaska another time. However, you understand that during these 2 years, a very big event happened in the history of America. And if you see which country the Kerala areas of the map were taken from, you will understand that another player here is Mexico. Let's look at the Texas of that time, or the Texas of today, or the whole of South America. How America took it into itself. This video is about the Mexican War. July 4th, 1776. After a long struggle, 13 British colonies succeeded from the British. These 13 colonies were named the United States of America. At this time, which other countries dominated in North America? Between the British, there were now America and France on one side, and Spain on the other. For this reason, when the British controlled the 13 colonies, they had an agreement with the European colonials that they would not move westward. But the independent USA was no longer bound by these treaties, so they slowly moved towards the west. What is the reason for this? Because they are developing very fast despite being a new country, and with that, their population also started to grow. Because the USA became a hope for European people for their new life, millions of Europeans migrated to the USA to change their lives. That is, with growing population comes prosperity, and with it a lot of money. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson purchased Louisiana from France, and America continued to grow. Then in 1819, they bought Florida from Spain. Hearing this purchase, you may think that these areas were empty and easily bought in America, connecting them within their own country. But the incident was not like that at all. The original owners of these territories were the various indigenous groups there, and these areas were slowly being taken over by typical white folk. And the actions were being justified with two words, which are manifest destiny. That is, it is improving as well as the population is growing. At this time, a belief arose among the Americans that they had been given the right to march westward. And this right is given to them by God Himself or some higher power. That is, this expansion was entirely political, but at that time, every American was instilled with the belief that we were the best nation, and it is our right to use these lands to improve ourselves. That means the tribals who are now occupying these lands are our enemies. This belief is well represented in John Gust's painting American Progress. I am sure you have seen this painting many times. Here, a woman is seen walking forward with a book in her hand, where civilization has flourished behind her. And in front of her, the wild animals and the natives are running away in fear. America is representing itself with this woman. In other words, you can say that it is an improvement. And if you see the small details of this painting, you can understand how typical Americans thought about the North American tribes or the native people there. But let's move away from America and look at another new country in the region. They also gained independence in 1821 after struggling with colonial Spain, and their territory was vast. But there's one area where they get into a bit of trouble, and that's Texas. This area was almost barren until the annexation of Mexico, and some places were sanctuaries for indigenous people, and maybe they didn't know that their new country was created by some European people, and there wasn't much of a crowd loyal to the Mexican government. Does that mean you know what to do now? That's what typical colonial supremacists do, which is to remove people from their own party. But there weren't enough whites and Europeans in Mexico to settle in Texas. And now they say, where to get enough European people? Yes, they can be found in America, because they are already having population problems and want to move further west. And at this time, different areas of Texas began to be sold to different people in America and wants to easily make them Mexican citizens. The situation was good at first. Many Europeans or white people came and settled in Texas, but the people who are being brought here will naturally never feel loyalty to the Mexican government. The loyalty they feel is to themselves or to some extent to America. That is, there was trouble. American settlers in Texas went to war with the Mexican military, and finally, on March 2, 1836, they declared Texas an independent state. But in between, some areas between Texas and Mexico remained as disputed territory. In the typical case, such a dispute between the two countries is either this region mine or that region mine. However, this is how the Republic of Texas was born in 1836. The majority are settlers from the USA. This region remained an independent country for almost 1 decade, but in December 1845, they officially joined the United States, mainly for the economic benefits of joining the then-growing power USA. Now it looks like the area of the US has expanded again, but even after gaining a new state, their manifest destiny was not yet fully complete. Their dream is to have all the territory from the Atlantic Ocean in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west. And then President James K. Polk was in power. The first objective of the election campaign at that time was to bring the whole of California into the USA. First, he made a very good offer to the Mexican government. He said to sell these areas to them in exchange for $25 million. This is exactly what they did in Louisiana and Florida, but Mexico rejected this time. In other words, America will have to cross its fingers now. As I said earlier, there were several disputed territories in Texas, and now that Texas is part of the US, those territories are also within the USA. As such, the president sent only 80 soldiers to the disputed territory, and Mexico saw the American troops entering their country from the other side. As a result, this time they attacked in full force. The president now has a reason for a full-blown war. The American-Mexican War began. General Stephen W. Kearny entered the disputed territories of Texas with full force, but they didn't see any Mexican forces. They then occupied the present New Mexican state of Santa Fe and declared it an American territory. Then they stayed here for several months for control gain. Then they began to move the American manifest destiny across the Pacific Ocean towards California. On the other hand, John's Lord occupied California ports with the U.S. Navy, and Commodore Robert Stockton then attacked Los Angeles directly. And from there, the Mexican governors fled first. On December 7th, Mexican General Andres Pico fought a significant battle with U.S. forces. The name of this war is the Battle of San Pascual, but the Mexican forces lost here too. So you understand that the Americans were ahead from the beginning of the war. But their biggest trick was yet to come. America was winning all the small battles along the border. But soon, they planned a massive expansion. The U.S. Navy was a very powerful force in the Gulf of Mexico from the very beginning. And since the beginning of the war, they have created a blockade in this direction. I have already mentioned the blockade on the other side. So Mexico then became completely isolated. And at that time, they attacked the most important port of Mexico with a huge U.S. force led by General Winfield Scott. And this is where a very famous U.S. tactic is used for the first time. That is amphibious landing. The U.S. used these tactics during World War II and even turned the tide of the Korean War with amphibious landings. In their first use of this famous tactic, they encountered some obstacles, but managed to capture this port. And then they started their journey towards the capital, Mexico City, so that the American soldiers left to put the last nail in the coffin. And on their way, they met a huge Mexican army, the army under the command of Santa Anna. The Mexican president during the war also started advancing from the capital towards Veracruz after receiving the news of the U.S. Army. Cerro Gordo was the most significant battle of the 2-year Mexican War, but the Americans won. Then they went to the capital and crossed some more obstacles and took over Mexico City. At this time, however, the USA defeated all of Mexico. They could have annexed all of Mexico, but they didn't. There is also a matter of racism here. First of all, it will be difficult to control such a large territory and such a different culture. And more importantly, many areas of Mexico were already very densely populated. America will not be able to evict the inhabitants of these regions and fill them with white people. And at that time, there were many indigenous people in Mexico, and some people mixed with Spaniards and Native Americans. And at that time, many American politicians did not want the mixed-race people there to call themselves Americans. And from this, a new map of the United States of America was created with the most potential and relatively empty places, and instead this time, Mexico was given $15 million, which previously wanted to pay $25 million. That means America doesn't really want to put dirt on its own hands. Even after occupying this region by fighting such a big war, they wanted to show the whole world that they bought this area through a very beautiful, fair business. That is, Mexico sold it on its own. So this is the event, why Texas joined America.